Paris, who neither marries nor has children, is like roadside weeds or empty cans, in other words, garbage. Useless moochers belong in the trash can. My brother Stanley's wife, Regina, said without hesitation. I was stunned, and even my mother, who I take care of. We don't need a daughter like you. Get out. Chimed in coldly. All right then, it seems they can't see past the immediate moment and understand what it will be like after I leave. So, I will take them up on their word and leave. Prepare yourselves. My name is Paris. I'm a 40-year-old office worker. At this age, most people would think I would be married with grown-up children. But fate had other plans for me, and I'm still single without children. In fact, I can't have children. When I was younger, I had health issues that led to this situation. But I'm grateful to be alive. However, those around me have no way of knowing my circumstances. Being single and childless at my age, people often think there must be something wrong with me. Though the rate of lifelong singleness is rising, it's curious how few people understand that. When there's talk of marriages or childbirths at work, I'm often met with awkward sympathy that leaves me exhausted. I don't mind at all, really. Other people's good news doesn't make me feel bad. I've mostly given up by now, but the cautious reactions of those around me are still hard to get used to. With that said, I still haven't given up on marriage. No matter the age, I still want to fall in love and, if fate allows, get married. Although right now, I enjoy my work more than romance, so the chances of marriage are slim. My job is rewarding and interesting, and I have no intention of quitting. But lately, my private life has been so busy that it's been affecting my work. The reason is that I'm currently caring for my mother. She used to live alone, but after Dad passed away, she fell and hurt her leg. While she can still walk, she needs a cane and help to avoid falling even when going to the bathroom. She can't handle grocery shopping, meals, or cleaning anymore. I have a brother, Stanley, but he's married with children and can't take care of her. So, without other options, I moved back home to care for Mom. It's been 2 years since I moved back, and it's been tough, affecting my work efficiency. I can't work overtime. Normally it's not a big deal, but during busy periods, overtime is essential to finish tasks. I have to rush through unfinished work, race to the grocery store, then dash home to prepare dinner. I help Mom with her bath and meals, clean up after dinner, and then do the laundry and cleaning. Before bed, I massage Mom's feet. Despite my devoted care, Mom says, it's only natural for a daughter. Repay the debt of raising you properly. She doesn't appreciate my efforts. Sure, I owe her for raising me, but a word of thanks would be nice. As a caregiver, that would change my motivation completely. But Mom only thinks it's natural and never thanks me. Instead, I face daily scoldings. At work, thinking about Mom, I glanced at the clock on the wall, almost time to leave. What should I do for dinner tonight? If I were alone, I could eat out or order pizza. But Mom insists on everything being homemade and refuses to eat out. The thought of having to cook, something I'm not particularly good at, after a long day at work gives me headache. Hiring a housekeeper isn't an option either since Mom immediately rejected the idea, saying, I don't want strangers in my house. As I pondered tonight's menu, Paris, can I have a word? My boss called out, snapping me out of my thoughts. Yes, what is it? I hate to ask, but could you stay for an extra hour tonight? I'm struggling to get everything done. As soon as I heard those words, my face fell. There was a time when I would have readily agreed, back when I was single and had no other obligations. But now, that's no longer possible. Because of Mom. I'm sorry, I need to get home to make dinner for Mom. Oh, right, you're taking care of your mom. Feeling guilty, I explained, and my boss looked just as apologetic. I'm sorry. It's okay, don't worry about it. I'll ask someone else. Even though my boss said it was fine. The guilt didn't go away. I glanced at my computer screen, seeing the unfinished work there. I really want to finish this today too, though. Looking at the clock, I saw it was already past the time. I could see colleagues who didn't have to work late getting ready to leave. With a sigh, I shut down my computer. Chicken soup again? I'd like steak for a change. Sorry. I'll make that tomorrow. Good grief, you're so thoughtless. Can't you figure out what your parent wants to eat? Hurrying home, I apologized to Mom for being late and started on dinner. I'm hungry, hurry up. Apologizing again to demanding Mom as I cooked, I still received complaints about the menu. Then, Mom yelled, "This is terrible. Why can't you make anything decent?" I bit my lower lip. Mom had always favored Stanley and been harder on me. This became even more pronounced after Dad died. I guess Dad had been the one to keep Mom in check. With Dad gone, Mom took out her frustrations on me as she pleased. Mom said I resembled Grandma. Grandma and Mom had the typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict, always at odds. But that's no reason to take it out on me just because of a resemblance. It seemed like Mom was avenging herself on Grandma through me. The dinner I thought I'd made well didn't taste good at all because of Mom's complaints. Mom, I have a job and no time. Maybe you should consider moving to a facility. I had suggested this countless times. But, are you trying to get rid of me? How could you treat your parent like a burden, you terrible daughter? Mom would only get furious, making the conversation impossible. And I can't force her into a facility against her will. If she had dementia or was bedridden, it might be different. But Mom is still mentally sharp and only has issues with her legs, not needing full-time care. Plus, it would cost money. Selling this house Dad left us would help. But as long as Mom, the owner, refuses, nothing can be done. I'd like to discuss it with Stanley, but he's currently working abroad. We can communicate, but I don't want to burden him more than he already is. In the end, taking care of Mom falls to me. But as her daughter, I suppose that's just how it is. I've gotten pretty used to just letting Mom's nagging and whims go in one ear and out the other. But that's only when it's just Mom. There's another problem. That problem is Regina. Stanley's on an overseas assignment that started last year and will last 3 years in total. Since they have young kids, his wife and their 2 children stayed in the States. Regina, Stanley's wife, is a lot like Mom. Even though Stanley is abroad, and she could go to her own family's place, she often comes over to our house. And when she comes, she has a great time chatting and having tea with Mom. In the meantime, I get stuck taking care of her 2 young children. Not that I mind taking care of kids. Stanley's kids are cute and I enjoy playing with them. The problem is Regina herself. Every weekend she comes over. Paris, at least prepare some snacks. I'm hungry, so give me money to go eat. If we can't eat out, hurry up and make something because the kids are hungry. Oh, and I want some wine too. If you don't have any, go buy some. I'm too busy taking care of the kids. I'm exhausted from taking care of the kids. I'll be staying over tonight, so get the guest room ready. I don't have pajamas, can you buy some for me? Well, that's how it goes. So, not only am I at Mom's beck and call, but also Regina's. While I'm running around busy, Mom and Regina are cracking open cans of beer in the middle of the day. Of course, it's the beer I bought, and they also have me prepare snacks. Plus, Mom makes me cook homemade meals for them. No matter how tired I am, the demands from those two never stop. And when I think I've got a moment's rest, my nephews come over asking to play. I don't get any rest, weekdays or weekends. In my 40s, my energy is dwindling, and lately, I just can't seem to recover from fatigue. Regina, please help a little. I try asking, but she says, "Why do I have to do it? Are you trying to make me look bad?" Paris, you're such a mean sister-in-law. And who are you to talk, you mooching 40-something? She adds, I'm not dependent on anyone, but apparently, Mom's been telling Regina, it's thanks to me she can live. If I stay silent, thinking it's too much trouble to correct her. You should hurry up and get married or something. Otherwise, you'll be left behind by society, just like a weed on the roadside, no, like a discarded can. She says, looking down on me. Look at me, I'm married with 2 kids and a perfect housewife. Jealous, right? She says with a smug face. At that point, I just focus on staying silent because arguing back seems pointless. But sometimes it really gets to me. And not just marriage, if you don't hurry, you won't be able to have kids. A woman should have at least 1 or 2 kids. When she said that, I silently slammed the casserole down on the table in front of her. Then, glaring at her, "Oh, that's right, Paris can't have kids," she said with a fake innocent smile, as if she had just remembered. I want to say something back, but then Mom chimes in with, "Seriously, not being able to have kids means you're basically done as a woman." Even my own mother says such cruel things to me, so it's no wonder Regina feels emboldened. Mom and Regina, being similar in many ways, would often get along and become lively. Thinking it was pointless to say anything to such people, I eventually returned to keeping my nephew company without saying a word. Regina didn't just come home when she wanted to relax. She also came when she wanted to host events by inviting her part-time job colleagues from her condominium. One holiday morning, she was being noisy as she prepared for a barbecue in our backyard. People from her work were arriving one after another, not just women with their children who also worked part-time. But it seemed she had invited full-time employees as well, bringing a large crowd. As expected, Regina started directing me to do things. Like do this, do that. Paris, we're out of bread. Paris, the meat is gone, go buy some more. We're out of booze, go get some. We're out of paper plates, can't you be more thoughtful? Her initially polite tone became increasingly rough, perhaps due to the alcohol. Unable to argue back in front of guests, I had no choice but to comply with her demands. Some people did offer to help, but it's fine, just let Paris handle it. Regina would stop them. Amidst the dizzying busyness, a man approached me and asked, "Are you okay?" Looking up, I saw a middle-aged man who was one of the employees. Probably had children of his own around my age, I thought. Sorry for barging in with so many people. We should be helping more, but we don't know the boundaries in someone else's home. Surprisingly, he seemed like a good person, unlike what I'd expect from Regina's acquaintance. I'm fine. I managed to smile back, but he looked apologetic. Sure, it was tough and Regina made me mad, but as long as everyone was having fun, that was the most important thing. At the end, when I heard Regina saying, "Come again soon," I felt a chill run down my spine. Days of being tossed around by Mom and Regina continued, until one day. Childless and single is no good, you don't understand people's feelings at all. Mom suddenly blurted out, wondering wide-eyed at what's going on. You don't understand people's feelings. She pointed at me accusingly. What? What's wrong, Mom? I'm not living with you to take care of you. What are you talking about, Mom? What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Don't act all high and mighty when you can't even do proper housework. What on earth was this about? She had said many unreasonable things before, but never so suddenly, and I couldn't keep up. With question marks floating in my head, Mom said, "If you can't do anything, at least contribute money to the household." But I am already covering some of the food expenses. Give me money I can spend freely. That's ridiculous. I was doing what I could, but recently I'd reduced my work hours and left early more often due to Mom's complaints. My income had decreased, and now she was demanding pocket money from me? No way. But you have your pension and Dad's inheritance. Shut up. Just give it to me. It was like being extorted by a delinquent. I resolutely refused, but later I was shocked to find that money was being taken from my account. I can't believe it. Even between parent and child, there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. I've reached my limit. I need to discuss this thoroughly with Stanley. Just as I was thinking that with my head in my hands, another sudden declaration was made. Paris, you're moving out of this house. What? Why all of a sudden? It's not sudden, I've told you before. Stop mooching off us. Mooching? What more do you want from me? You're useless if you refuse to contribute to the household. If you don't want to give money, then get out. Are you serious, Mom? I am serious. Mom's eyes were serious. I wondered what had gotten into her, and then someone popped their head in and asked, "Are you done talking?" Regina? It was Stanley's wife. It was unusual for her to come over on a weeknight, but she said she came because her 2 kids were at a friend's house for a sleepover. Paris, I've decided to move into this house. She made this abrupt announcement. What? What do you mean? Can't you understand? Typical moocher with low comprehension. What's with that? Listen, your brother, well, my husband, will not be back for another 2 years. During that time, raising kids alone is tough, so I decided to move in here. What about your parents' house, Regina? My older brother and his family already live there, so it's not possible. But does Stanley agree with this? I don't need my husband's opinion. I decided to move in here. This was agreed upon by Scarlett too. But in that case, only Stanley's room is free. How can 3 people fit in there? What are you talking about? Paris, you're moving out, so there's no problem. Wait, I am supposed to leave? Exactly. Didn't I tell you before? You who neither marries nor has kids is like a weed or an empty can on the roadside. In other words, trash. A useless moocher is to be thrown in the garbage. This is absurd. What kind of nonsense is this? I was dumbfounded and couldn't close my mouth. So, please leave, Regina said with a sweet smile. But if I leave, will Mom be okay? Of course, you will take care of her. What? Naturally. If you don't want that, then send lots of money. You've been a moocher all this time, so you can at least do that, can't you? No, there's no way I can do that. I don't deserve to be called a moocher in the first place. But Mom seemed delighted to live with Regina and her adorable grandchildren. Regina seemed thrilled to move from a cramped condo to a spacious house. This is hopeless. But then I thought, wait a minute. This might not be a bad idea. I had lived alone before. I earn enough to do that again. Besides, if I move out, I won't have to spend time caring for Mom. Mom has been getting a lot healthier lately, going to the grocery store and managing house chores by herself. Wouldn't it be better if Regina were here? As for sending money, well, I'll think about it later. I see only benefits in this. But will the 2 of them realize? The drawbacks if I move out? They probably don't, judging by their carefree smiles. They likely think that if I move out, they can live happily together. They assume I'll do the housework by commuting and take care of mom. They think I will send money, so they won't have financial issues. As if that would work. But I decided to keep quiet for now. First, I need to get out of this situation. I silently watched the two of them. The next day, I hurriedly began preparations for moving out. To keep them distracted and thinking they could still benefit, I gave them some spending money. Then I sent Mom, Regina, and my nephews on a trip, covering the expenses myself. It was quite a cost, but I considered it a necessary investment for the future. While everyone was away, I finished moving. Upon arriving at my new home, I felt a sense of relief wash over me as I began unpacking. Just as I started to relax, the phone rang. It was Mom. As soon as I picked up, she yelled, "Where are you?" in a high-pitched voice. I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear. "I'm at the new place." "The new place? Where is that? Why did you move out without telling me?" "Well, you were the one who told me to leave." "Yeah, but still." "Fine, if you're out, it's a relief. Now I can have Regina and her family move in. And you better start sending money." Despite paying for her trip, she's already asking for money. Mom only thinks about using me. She hung up abruptly after demanding money. Sudden silence filled the room. I stared blankly for a while. Enough is enough. All right, time to start fresh and live a new life. Living with Mom meant enduring endless days of sacrifice. I had to give up hobbies, free time, and even work hours to cater to Mom and Regina's whims. Finally, I am free. I should try something new, shouldn't I? I mused aloud. But nothing came to mind. I've never really had hobbies, being a workaholic. Then, a thought struck me. All right, let's sign up for a dating app. It wasn't because of anything Mom or Regina said. But after resuming my solo life, I felt a pang of loneliness. I had the time, so why not explore new connections? Once decided, it's best to act quickly. I immediately began researching various websites to find a potential partner. A few days later, after registering on several sites and even talking to an advisor, I found an interesting event on one of the websites. It was a bus tour for finding a marriage partner. Travel tends to bring out people's true selves, or so I've heard. Formal meetings with hello, and small talk are fine, but travel seemed like a more relaxed way to meet someone. Even if I didn't meet anyone special, I could still enjoy the. So, the bus tour began. After introductions, we arrived at our destination, and it was free time. I thought they could have organized a bit more, but groups started forming slowly. Some were already pairing off. The participants were around my age, actively engaging with one another, which was impressive. I decided to take it at my own pace when. Excuse me. Are you Paris? A voice startled me, making me straighten up. Yes, I'm Paris, I replied awkwardly. Meeting people in this setting felt entirely different from work. My voice even cracked. Turning around nervously, I saw a man with wide eyes and a somewhat dazed expression. He looked around my age, maybe older. Something about him seemed familiar. Oh no, embarrassing. Paris, it's me. Do you remember? Huh? It sounded like one of those icebreakers. Don't we know each other? But I did recognize him. Remember the barbecue at your place? Oh, right. I remembered. The middle-aged man who checked on me when many people from Regina's workplace came over. Yes, I forgot because I only met him once, but it's definitely him. When the man greeted me with, "It's been a while," I also greeted him back with, "It's been a while." Apparently, this man who would become Regina's boss was an unmarried man with no children or wife. Indeed, he wasn't wearing a wedding ring, but I thought many men don't wear them, so I didn't pay much attention to it. Oh, I also assumed that people of a certain age are married or have kids. Well, I guess it's natural for people to assume the same about me. As I chuckled to myself, the man spoke up, "By the way." The man. Ian said, "How is Regina doing?" "My sister?" "Oh, she's Stanley's wife, so she's my sister-in-law. You mean Regina, right?" "Yeah, probably." "Probably?" "I moved out of my parents' house. Regina started living with them instead." "Oh, really?" "Yeah, well." I couldn't say I was kicked out, so I smiled awkwardly to cover it up. "I see. I didn't know she quit her part-time job." "What?" The sudden revelation made my mind go blank for a moment. "She quit her part-time job?" I hadn't heard anything about that. "Yes. Maybe around the time of that barbecue." "What?" "But she was supposed to be going to her part-time job as usual." This was the first time I heard Regina quit her job. Up until I moved out, she had always been coming over and lazing around, saying she was tired from her part-time job. Oh, then she must have found another part-time job. Maybe. Regina rarely talks about her work. But I think she would have mentioned if she quit or changed her job. But why did she quit? Oh, don't you know? She was dating one of our younger employees, and oh. What is that? I'm really curious, so please don't stop there. Dating a younger employee? Oh, well, I feel like it's inappropriate to say. Then I'll turn away, so please say it as if you're talking to yourself. Well, okay. Okay? I'm glad Ian isn't a stubborn person. I turned to the right, and Ian turned to the left. Then Ian said in a small voice, "She was found out to be dating one of our younger employees, which caused a problem, so she quit." What? It's just me talking to myself. When I reflexively asked in a loud voice, Ian hastily replied. There was no need for him to repeat it, I heard it clearly. I see, now I understand. Regina was having an affair. Affairs are expensive, and Stanley's allowance alone must have been getting tight. But she got fired from her part-time job, and if she started a new job, she wouldn't be able to meet her lover. So, what to do? Convince Mom to live together, and use Mom's money and my allowance to get by. That way, she wouldn't have to use Stanley's allowance for living expenses and could keep all of it for herself. I see. I couldn't help but mutter. Then there's only one thing I need to do. That night, I quickly made a phone call. A few days later, the phone rang again. This time it was Regina. Hello? As soon as I answered the phone. Paris, why aren't you sending the allowance? She shouted angrily. Regina shouted so loudly that I could hear her even after I took the phone away from my ear. You're not even helping with caregiving. I'm busy with my part-time job and raising my kids, going to the grocery store, cooking, and cleaning. You don't have a husband or kids, so you should come and help. No way. I hung up, but she called back within a second. Hello. If you can't come, at least send some money. No way. I hung up again. But she didn't give up and called back immediately, so this time I answered without saying anything. It was Mom. Paris, how can you abandon your own mother? You're the one who kicked me out. I told you to leave, but I didn't say you could abandon your responsibilities. Regina is there, isn't she? Regina has kids and a job. You don't have kids, so you should do it. But Regina lost her job and is hanging out with men. That's why she's busy. What? It took Mom a few seconds to process what I said, and then she asked again, a beat later. So I repeated it for her. Regina got close to a young male coworker at her part-time job and got fired. What? Is Regina there with you? Yes, but... Then tell her this. I glanced at the clock on the wall. Tell her what? Stanley is coming over soon, and she should think about what she'll do after the divorce. Divorce? Well, if you cheat on your husband, divorce is inevitable. What? Mom stammered while I could hear Regina in the background saying, What's wrong, Scarlett? Is Paris going to send money? But Mom couldn't say anything. Since she was silent, I hung up. I checked my messages on my smartphone. There was one from Stanley. I'm almost at the house. Thanks for telling me about Regina's affair. I'll discuss Mom's future with her too. Humming, I put down my smartphone. Not long after that, Stanley and Regina got divorced. Regina was entirely at fault. After I told Stanley about the affair, he quickly arranged a temporary return to the US from his job overseas. He hired a reputable private investigator and gathered solid evidence of the affair. Stanley got custody of the kids, of course. As for Regina, she disappeared. Stanley sought compensation in the divorce trial, but Regina had squandered affairs. Regina turned to her parents for help, but they were furious and disowned her. She vanished after that. Regina's parents paid the compensation to Stanley. They vowed to track her down and make her repay them. Regina thought she could enjoy her freedom while Stanley was away for work, but she chose the wrong kind of freedom. Mom, who was close to Regina, was in shock. It seems Regina had been sweet-talking Mom and getting money from her pension as an allowance. Regina had convinced Mom, Paris will send plenty of money. Well, it's Mom's fault for being fooled. Even though Mom aged rapidly due to stress, I have no intention of taking care of her. Mom used and neglected me, so I don't owe her anything anymore. Since Stanley agreed, we sold our childhood home to cover the costs of Mom's admission into a care facility. However, it wasn't enough, and when needed, Stanley and I decided to split the additional costs. Though feeling disheartened, Mom resisted, but when I told her it's okay to be abandoned, she reluctantly accepted. She will have to endure a lonely old age. It's all because you brought this on yourself. I took responsibility for Stanley's children for the time being. Stanley has been negotiating with his company and will be returning home soon. When he returns, Stanley will start living with his kids, and until then, I'm the temporary mom. Compared to taking care of our mom, this is easier, but it's still very challenging. I truly respect all the moms out there. Even though I can't have and raise my own children, I'm grateful to experience a bit of motherhood. My nephews can be annoying, but overall, they're very adorable. I felt the joy of parenting. The time when Stanley's return neared. Will you go out with me? Ian asked me out. We've actually met a few times since then. I realized we have a lot in common and I genuinely liked him, so I was honestly happy. But feeling anxious, I asked, I'm unable to have children. Does that matter to you? It doesn't matter. At my age, I don't think I could have kids either. It would be just the two of us, you know? Yes, I want it to be just the two of us. His words warmed my heart. Just the two of us? Yes, just the two of us, together forever. Forever? Please stay by my side forever. It was almost like a proposal. In that moment, tears started to fall. Crying and laughing at the same time, My answer was clear. Mom. Kevin's trembling voice echoed through the dimly lit living room. What's wrong? I rushed over to my youngest son, my heart pounding with worry. Dad said, since I'm not a genius like Daniel, I must not be his real son. Kevin choked out between sobs. He said I'm just a failure, and spending time and money on me is a waste. He told me to just live with you from now on. Then he packed his bags and left. Oh, honey. It's going to be okay. I wrapped my arms around him tightly. You are a genius, Kevin. That's a lie. He pushed away from me, his eyes filled with pain. I can't even get first place in sports or academics. Dad's right, I'm just a stupid failure. No, that's not true at all. I cupped his face in my hands, making sure he was looking right at me. Kevin, you have incredible talents that even Daniel can't match. I know that with every fiber of my being. The only stupid one here is your father, for not being able to see how gifted you truly are. It was just another typical evening, or so I thought. But when I came home, I found Kevin curled up in the dark, tears streaming down his face. Brian, who always favored our eldest son Daniel for his first-place test scores and genius label, had finally done the unthinkable. He had taken Daniel and left, abandoning Kevin and me. Honestly, I was more than ready for a divorce. But to insult and demean Kevin like that? Unforgivable. I swore to myself that I would make Brian acknowledge this child's true potential, no matter what it took. 11 years after the divorce. As part of my new job, I was tasked with conducting a hiring interview. Next candidate, please come in, I called out. What are you doing here? Brian froze in shock as he entered the interview room. My name is Miranda. And I'm a 40-year-old staffing agency employee. Brian is 3 years older than me. We first met at work, when he was my senior colleague at the same company and department. He was always an extremely strict person. I found him rather intimidating at first. But as I got to know him better, I realized he wasn't just hard on others, he was even harder on himself, pushing himself to the limit. It was him who made the first move in our relationship. Unlike him, I knew how to relax during breaks and treat myself generously when I needed some self-care. I often wondered what made someone as uncompromising as Brian fall for someone like me. So one time, while we were out on a dinner date, "What do you like about me?" I mustered up the courage to ask. Brian looked me in the eyes. "Miranda, it was your stubborn refusal to give up, your resilience, and your unwavering positive thinking that made me fall in love with you," he said. I was surprised to learn that Brian saw me in such a light, but it filled me with joy to know that his love for me was genuine and pure. On our second anniversary of dating, he proposed, and we got married. It wasn't some dramatic, over-the-top proposal. He just turned to me while we were in the car and said, "Miranda, we're getting married." It was a rather high-handed way of proposing, but that was so very Brian. I remember happily saying, "Of course," without a moment's hesitation. 10 years have passed since then. We now have 2 children together. Daniel, who just turned 13, and Kevin, who is 12. From an outsider's perspective, it may seem like we have it all, blessed with great careers, wonderful children, and living a life of contentment without any worries. However, there's something that has been troubling me lately. It's the fact that Daniel is simply too much of a genius. We first realized his extraordinary intellect when he was just 5 years old. I've always been an avid reader, so our bookshelves at home were lined with countless novels and books. At the tender age of 5, there's no way a child should be able to comprehend the contents of a novel densely packed with small print. Yet one day, "This book is so interesting," Daniel declared. I'm not sure if he truly understood the story, but most children wouldn't show the slightest interest in a book devoid of pictures or colors. But the fact that he found the book fascinating astounded both Brian and me. Even when we watched quiz shows together, Daniel would exclaim, "This is how you read that," and effortlessly read even the most complex characters. As he grew older, "What is this?" he started asking Brian and me about every unfamiliar character he encountered, always wanting to know. His concentration was incredible. He would attempt to read books that were 270 pages thick. But that's not the only remarkable thing about him. Even though we never sent him to any cram schools or tutoring, he would take the initiative to look up and learn about any words or concepts he didn't understand. When Daniel was just 3 years old, he saw a commercial on TV advertising a tablet designed for children. He said he wanted one, so we bought it for him. He really took to it and started eagerly researching various topics on his own. That might have been the catalyst that sparked his passion for learning. Furthermore, after Daniel started reading novels, he developed an interest in a wide range of subjects. Whenever we went to the bookstore, instead of heading to the comics section, he would make a beeline for the corner where study guides and reference books were displayed. "I want this!" He would bring over workbooks and other materials, exclaiming, "Daniel really is an incredible child. He takes the initiative to study and learn everything on his own," Brian remarked with a proud grin. "Indeed. He tackles those workbooks with such enthusiasm, as if he's playing a game rather than studying," I agreed, my heart swelling with joy. "Ah, Daniel is a genius. A true genius." Brian praised our son, his chest puffed out with pride. "Oh, stop being such a doting parent," I teased, but deep down, I was just as elated. It's only natural for parents to feel immensely proud of their children. Wanting to further nurture Daniel's potential, we decided to enroll him in a tutoring center once he started elementary school. We felt that the children's tablet was reaching its limits, and Daniel himself had expressed, "I want to study more." So we signed him up. Daniel would always skip happily on his way to the tutoring center. "I'm going to stop by the tutoring center after school again today," he'd announce with a beaming smile. "More questions for the teacher?" I'd ask. "Yeah. The teachers at the tutoring center teach me so much advanced material meant for higher grades. It's even more fun than regular school." Daniel's eyes would sparkle as he spoke, his genuine love for learning shining through. Then one day, an opportunity arose for Daniel to showcase his extraordinary talents. It was the elementary school mock exam. Incredibly, he claimed the top spot, ranking first in the entire grade. "I got first place," Daniel exclaimed, bursting through the door. "What? No way. First place?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Is that true? What a kid. Daniel really is a genius. That's amazing. I'm so happy." Brian was practically bouncing off the walls with excitement, his voice booming louder than anyone else's in the room. "Yeah, it's true. Look." Daniel spread the results sheet on the table, the words "first place" prominently displayed. Brian and I couldn't stop grinning from ear to ear. From that day forward, Daniel consistently ranked first in nearly all the mock exams throughout his elementary school years. He became known as a genius, a prodigy who garnered attention from his school and the entire neighborhood. "Daniel, you got first place in the last mock exam, right? As a reward, I'll take you anywhere you want to go," Brian announced one day. "Yay! Where should I pick?" Daniel pondered, his eyes wide with anticipation. An amusement park? The arcade? I'm up for anything, Brian offered, ready to indulge our son's every whim. Then, I want to go to an art museum. I recently read a book about Leonardo da Vinci, and it made me really want to see his artwork in person, Daniel declared, his thirst for knowledge and culture shining through. Both Brian and I were taken aback by his request. For an elementary school student to want to visit an art museum, it was truly impressive. As Daniel entered middle school, his reputation as a genius only grew, and even his homeroom teacher seemed constantly amazed by his abilities. During parent-teacher conferences, we'd hear comments like, "Daniel has an excellent attitude and is very considerate of others. His academic performance is outstanding, of course, but his physical abilities are also impeccable." Every single time, he'd be praised in all aspects. "Daniel, I heard your teacher complimented you again." "Yeah, but I think the teachers are just being too nice," Daniel would respond humbly. "Your teacher was surprised, saying you're so brilliant that you might surpass even their own academic abilities," Brian chuckled. "Ha ha ha ha." Daniel laughed along. Brian and Daniel would have such light-hearted conversations, their faces filled with joy. The sight of those two warmed my heart. Or at least, it should have. I've been gushing about Daniel's incredible talents, but my intention wasn't simply to brag. The issue I mentioned earlier, the one that's been troubling me, is about how Brian dotes on Daniel excessively because of his genius. We have 2 sons. If it were just a matter of adoring Daniel, I'd be delighted. However, Brian's favoritism towards Daniel is so blatant that it drastically affects his attitude towards Kevin. Unlike Daniel, Kevin is a regular child. Ever since kindergarten, he hasn't been able to read countless complex characters or spend all day engrossed in books and workbooks out of a love for studying. Kevin, with his active personality and preference for sports over academics, is always engrossed in playing basketball. Just because Kevin isn't a genius like Daniel doesn't mean I intend to give him special treatment. We enrolled Daniel in a tutoring center because he loves studying, and we let Kevin join the basketball team because that's what he wanted. We bought study materials for Daniel and basketball gear for Kevin. The 2 brothers have completely different personalities and interests, but they get along well. "Daniel, I don't understand this part. Can you help me?" Kevin would often ask. "Huh? Again? Fine, where is it?" Daniel might seem slightly annoyed at having his precious study time interrupted, but he actually enjoys teaching others and doesn't seem to mind when his younger brother asks for help. "Wow! Daniel, you're amazing as always. You explain things even more clearly than the teacher," Kevin would exclaim, his eyes shining with admiration for his older brother. Seeing the joy on Kevin's face, Daniel would smile happily in return. On the other hand, when Daniel stood up to take a break, Kevin would exclaim, "Daniel, let's play basketball." "Oh, sure. I've been sitting for so long, I was just thinking I wanted to move around a bit," Daniel would respond. With that, the 2 brothers would start playing basketball together. They seemed to have found a good balance, enjoying both studying and sports as a pair. The teachers and people around them might only focus on Daniel's genius, but Kevin was truly doing his best in his own way. To me, both of my sons were precious, and I showered them with equal love and affection. However, Brian seemed to have a different perspective than mine. "Daniel, is there anything you want? You're always working so hard, so I'll buy you whatever you'd like," Brian would offer. "Huh? Not really, I don't need anything," Daniel would reply, taken aback. Don't hold back. It's my job to make sure you have the best environment for studying, Daniel. Come on, just tell me what you want, anything at all. Well, I guess I've been wanting some new books lately. There are a few that caught my interest, he would finally admit. Books, got it. I'll go buy them for you tomorrow, Brian would declare. Ruffling Daniel's hair as he studied in the living room, Brian would shower him with endless praise. It was always like this, with Brian frequently asking Daniel what he wanted or where he wanted to go. However, even when Kevin won a basketball game or endured a grueling practice, Brian never praised him. On this particular day, as soon as Kevin returned from basketball practice, Brian shot him a cold glare. Kevin, were you playing basketball again? Instead of wasting time on sports, why don't you study a bit more like Daniel? Don't you understand that studying hard now will lead to a better life in the future? Brian sighed in exasperation. After glaring at Kevin, Brian left the living room. It wasn't as if Kevin didn't study at all. He always made sure to finish his homework properly after practice ended. He was doing everything he was supposed to do. But according to Brian, if you didn't get first place or produce results in either academics or sports, it was as good as doing nothing at all. Before we got married, I fell in love with Brian for his strict self-discipline and hard-working nature. But was it really appropriate to force those same expectations onto our children? Kevin was truly doing his best every single day. When he entered society, maybe producing results would indeed be important. But at 12 years old, wasn't it too early to be having that conversation with Kevin? I couldn't stand how Brian refused to acknowledge Kevin's efforts. Hey! I called out, stopping Brian as he left the living room. I led him to the bedroom, out of earshot of the children. Hey! Why are you being so hard on Kevin? I demanded. It's because Kevin doesn't study, right? There's no point in playing basketball all the time. Kevin should follow Daniel's example, Brian retorted. Daniel loves studying, and Kevin loves sports. Isn't it our job as parents to create an environment where they can both pursue their passions? No, that's not right. There's no use in just doing what you like all the time. Kevin is always playing basketball. I bet he hardly studies at all. It's not just about doing what he likes. He always finishes his homework after practice, and the school has never said anything about his academic performance being subpar. Kevin is working hard too, you know? He looked so sad after what you said to him. He had that kind of expression, huh? He's really weak, even mentally. He's completely different from Daniel in every way. Stop comparing them. Anyway, I'm saying this for Kevin's sake. No matter what I tried to explain to Brian, he simply wouldn't listen. I was even starting to feel terrified of Brian when he got like this. Why couldn't he understand? How many years had it been since Brian started showing blatant favoritism towards Daniel? Every time Brian hurled insults at Kevin, like, "Learn from Daniel. Study more. You're useless." I would scold Brian countless times. Yet his attitude never changed. A few days later, when Brian got home, Kevin was relaxing on the sofa, watching TV after finishing his homework. Daniel seemed engrossed in his studies, completely unfazed by the noise from the TV. Seeing this familiar scene, "Hey, Kevin, are you watching TV again? What about your studies?" Brian approached Kevin and suddenly shouted. Frozen in fear of Brian, Kevin, Daniel, and I all stiffened on the spot. After a few seconds of heavy silence, But I already finished my homework? Kevin spoke up, startled. I also approached Brian, wondering what the commotion was about. What's with you all of a sudden? Kevin finished his homework properly. What's wrong with him watching some TV? I snapped. Daniel is still studying, isn't he? Why doesn't Kevin study as much as him? And if he watches TV, it'll distract him. Not only does he not study, but he's always getting in his way. Brian's anger showed no signs of abating as he started berating Kevin. Kevin's face grew darker, as if he had done something terrible. Dad, I'm just studying on my own. I like studying. And the TV noise doesn't bother me at all, so it's fine. Daniel desperately tried to explain to Brian for Kevin's sake, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Perhaps it was from that day onward. Eventually, whenever Brian came home from work, Kevin would immediately go to his own room to avoid being scolded. At 12 years old, he must have sensed that Brian was playing favorites with Daniel. Brian's attitude and words had surely wounded his heart deeply. Daniel would study in the living room, while he holed up in his own room. Inevitably, a distance grew between the two brothers. It pained me to see them like this. What on earth are you thinking? They used to be such close siblings, but because of you, there's now a rift between Daniel and Kevin. Kevin has been really hurt by your attitude and words too. Enough is enough. I finally reached my limit and found myself shouting at Brian. Who cares if there's distance between the brothers? They were never a good match to begin with. Kevin just gets in the way of Daniel's studies. How can you say such a thing? Unable to bear Brian's cruel words any longer, I raised my voice. Don't say anything else that will make Kevin sad. I scolded him as loudly as I could. This is all for their sake. No matter how much I reprimanded him, no matter how much Daniel pleaded, Brian's way of thinking didn't change. It goes without saying that I decided I couldn't let Kevin and Brian interact any further. Fine. I got it. Then please don't involve yourself with Kevin from now on. I see. That might actually be for the best. If I look after Daniel and you look after Kevin, we can raise them without interfering with each other. I felt a chill at the eerie smile on Brian's face. I didn't know what form of parenting we should pursue or what the right approach was, but maybe this was okay for now. If he was going to keep comparing Daniel and Kevin and verbally abusing Kevin, then perhaps it was better if I was the only one looking after Kevin, so he wouldn't get hurt. However, I would soon learn that Brian's idea wasn't as simple as just dividing parenting roles. 1 month later. As I had requested, Brian stopped meddling in Kevin's education altogether. Not only that, but I felt like he was actively avoiding conversations as much as possible. I wasn't happy about it, but Daniel was already mature enough to make his own judgments and study independently, so there likely wouldn't be any issues even if I didn't get involved. After that, Brian stopped saying anything to Kevin, and he started coming down to the living room a little more often. So for now, maybe this arrangement was okay. I tried to convince myself of that. However, one day when I came home from work as usual, I felt that something was slightly off. Daniel's shoes, which should always be there, were missing. And so were Brian's. Maybe Brian just hadn't come home yet? But what about Daniel's shoes? Did he go out to play? With that thought, I hurried towards the living room. Entering the living room, I felt that strange sensation again. There were no signs of a disturbance, but all of Daniel's study materials, which should have been neatly tucked away in the corner of the living room, were completely gone. That wasn't all. Brian's golf set, his hobby, had also vanished from the entryway. Something was wrong. I dashed up to Daniel's room on the second floor, and sure enough, all of Daniel's belongings had been cleaned out. Next, I headed to Kevin's room. There, I found Kevin curled up in a small ball, tears streaming down his face. "Kevin? What's wrong? What happened? Where's Daniel? And Dad? Mom. What's going on?" Even though it was already evening and getting dark, Kevin was huddled in the room without turning on the lights. I rushed over to him in a panic. "Dad said, since I'm not a genius like Daniel, I must not be his real son." Kevin choked out between sobs. "He said I'm just a failure, and spending time and money on me is a waste. He told me to just live with you from now on." Then he packed his bags and left. I couldn't believe it. To say such cruel things to his own son. Brian, who always favored Daniel for his first-place test scores and genius label, had finally done the unthinkable. He had taken Daniel and left, abandoning Kevin and me. Was this the meaning behind Brian's eerie smile? Honestly, I was more than ready for a divorce. But to do it in such a heartless manner, wasn't that going too far? How could he? Was it because I'm no good? That's not true at all. It's going to be okay. You are a genius, Kevin. I gently placed my hand on Kevin's shoulder, trying to calm him down. That's a lie. He pushed away from me, his eyes filled with pain. I can't even get first place in sports or academics. Dad's right, I'm just a stupid failure. No, that's not true at all. I cupped his face in my hands, making sure he was looking right at me. Kevin, you have incredible talents that even Daniel can't match. I know that with every fiber of my being. The only stupid one here is your father, for not being able to see how gifted you truly are. But to insult and demean Kevin like that? Unforgivable. I swore to myself that I would make Brian acknowledge this child's true potential, no matter what it took. Kevin, how about we go out for some steak today? Eat as much as you want, okay? I desperately tried to change the subject, deciding that the two of us should go out for a meal to take his mind off things. Despite his gloomy expression, it's delicious. Kevin ate a lot of steak. That night, when I called Brian, he picked up immediately without trying to run or hide. Oh, yeah. Daniel and I left the house and rented a place. He calmly admitted. I see. I have nothing more to say to you. But let me talk to Daniel properly. It's cruel to suddenly force him to be separated from Kevin and me like this. With that, I asked to speak to Daniel on the phone. Daniel, I'm so sorry. It must have been scary when your dad suddenly made you pack your things. Your father and I are going to get a divorce. Who do you want to live with, Daniel? Somewhere in my heart, I was certain he would choose me. However, Daniel's response was unexpected. I'm going to live with Dad. It's not that I don't like you, Mom. But for his sake and my own, I've decided to stay with him. Please take good care of Kevin. It was such a mature statement, not at all childlike. So Daniel chose his father. I was overwhelmed with sadness and loneliness, but if it was Daniel's wish to be with his dad, I couldn't forcefully twist his opinion. In the end, Daniel and I ended up living apart, and soon after, Brian and I finalized our divorce. 11 years have passed since then. I didn't want to work at the same company as Brian, so I used the divorce as an opportunity to change jobs. We moved to a new house, but I didn't want to transfer Kevin to a new school when he was about to graduate, especially due to his parents' circumstances. So we relocated to a place close to our previous home. Brian seemed to have the same idea and moved to a location not far from our former house. The child support payments for Kevin only lasted for 3 years after the divorce. Even when I sent reminders, I never received a response. I considered complaining, but I was earning a decent income myself, so money wasn't an issue. More than anything, I didn't want to get into petty squabbles with Brian over such matters. So I decided not to say anything about the unpaid child support. Today, as part of my new job, I'm scheduled to conduct a hiring interview. There will be 2 interviewers today, myself and one other person. Please come in. I called out to the candidate. The person who entered the interview room, hoping for a career change, didn't start with a polite greeting. Instead, their first words were ones of shock and surprise. "What are you doing here?" Brian froze in shock as he entered the interview room. He hadn't expected to find his ex-wife and the second son he had abandoned sitting there. Taken aback, he took a step backward. Only Kevin and I were seated in the interview room, so his surprise was understandable. "Please, have a seat." I gestured to the chair. Still stunned, Brian slowly sat down as instructed. From the moment he entered, Brian's business etiquette was sorely lacking. In a normal interview, he would have been immediately disqualified. Of course, I had no intention of passing him from the start, but his reactions were amusing, so I decided to continue the interview a little longer. "Why are you 2 at this company?" Brian demanded. "Did you not properly research this company before coming in for the interview? You should have been able to figure that out." I scoffed. "I did my research. This company has been around for 10 years and is a rapidly growing staffing agency with annual sales of $7 million, right? My previous job was in a similar field, so I thought I could start over here and came for the interview." "Did you look up the name of the CEO?" "The CEO? No, come to think of it, I didn't." "You can take out your smartphone. Check it right now." With a puzzled expression, Brian rummaged through his bag for his smartphone, turned it on, and started browsing the company website. Kevin and I waited for Brian's reaction, laughing in anticipation. "Huh? Why is your name listed here?" Brian exclaimed. "Ah ha ha ha." Kevin and I burst out laughing. "Why do you think?" "It's because I'm the CEO of this company, of course." I smirked. "No way! How did you?" After the divorce, I decided to go independent to make use of my experience. Fortunately, my father was a business owner, so I was able to learn various insights from him. I couldn't start right away after the divorce since I needed time to prepare. It was tough at first, but as Brian mentioned, the company has now grown to have annual sales of $7 million. Brian had applied to this company without knowing that I was the CEO. Like me, Brian had moved to a location close to our previous home, so our houses weren't too far apart. Narrowing it down to staffing agencies, it wasn't surprising that my rapidly growing company was a hit in the region. When I was reviewing the applications of those who passed the first round of interviews, I couldn't help but laugh when I saw your face. I knew right away that you hadn't researched the CEO's name because if you knew it was me, you wouldn't have applied, I explained. Then why did you let me through to the final interview? Wouldn't you hate working with me too? That's simple. I just wanted to see your reaction because I thought it would be entertaining. I have no intention of hiring you. What did you say? You. What a cruel person you are. Brian stood up from his chair, looking as if he might lunge at me at any moment. However, Kevin quickly intervened to stop him. Hey, calm down. Kevin! Say something to your mother. Tell her not to make fun of your father. What? Father? Who are you even talking about? Huh? I don't have a father. There's never been such a person in my life. The man standing in front of me now is just the guy who abandoned me. That's all. Kevin looked Brian straight in the eye, his gaze serious and unwavering as he spoke those words. Brian hung his head at Kevin's statement. Anyway, can you please sit down? I asked. Yeah, Brian muttered, settling back into his chair. I think it's about time we wrap up this interview. Is there anything you'd like to say? I prompted. I was in the wrong. So please, hire me. This company is my last hope. I'm begging you. Brian pleaded. Excuse me? Your attitude has been terrible since the moment you walked in, and you came here without even knowing the CEO's name. Who do you think would hire someone like that? This company is all I have left. You understand, don't you? There aren't many companies that will hire someone over 50. I thought I could rely on Daniel's support, but that hope has been completely shattered. I need to find a new job soon, or I'll be in trouble. Brian exclaimed. Oh, speaking of Daniel. Come in. I called out to someone waiting outside the interview room. It was Daniel. Dad, long time no see. Daniel greeted. Daniel? Why are you at this company too? Brian was so shocked to see Daniel that he toppled out of his chair. He really had a knack for dramatic reactions, and Daniel, Kevin, and I couldn't hold back our laughter. Ahahaha, you seem as lively as ever. Daniel chuckled. You left home saying you were going to become a teacher, but instead you're at this company without sending me any money? Do you have any idea how much I've invested in you all this time? Brian fumed. When Daniel turned 22 and was about to start his career, he moved out of the house he shared with Brian and began living on his own. Kevin and I frequently kept in touch with Daniel, so we had heard all the details from him about living with Brian. According to Daniel, Brian seemed to think that since Daniel was a genius, he would surely work for a big company and become a CEO, or at least a doctor. Either way, he believed Daniel would become wealthy. However, the path Daniel chose was that of a teacher. He had always enjoyed teaching others. So when Daniel decided to pursue a career in education, I completely understood and was overjoyed for him. But Brian apparently told Daniel, "You can't make much money as a teacher. Quit that idea. Find a more lucrative profession." Fed up with Brian's attitude, Daniel finally left home. It had been 2 years since then, and he had grown distant from him. Daniel was now 24 years old. He was still working as a teacher. When he learned about Brian's interview today, I have some things I want to say to that man too. Daniel had come to our company. I'm grateful to you, Dad. That's why, when you two said you were getting a divorce, I decided to live with you, thinking that if Kevin was by Mom's side, I should be by yours, Daniel explained. Then why won't you listen to what I say? Go work at a better company and support me, Brian demanded. That's exactly the issue. As I grew older, I realized you only saw me as a tool. You kept talking about money, and when you quit your job, I knew you were a lost cause. Apparently, he had quit his job and started working part-time when Daniel graduated from college. He probably thought Daniel would get a job and financially support him. Brian, who had always been so strict and serious with himself, had grown complacent with Daniel's genius and made overly lenient choices for himself. Daniel, I'm sorry. It's not too late. Come back home, Brian pleaded. No way. I'm going to continue being a teacher, and living with you is the last thing I want to do. Daniel refused. Then Kevin, you'll do. You work at this company, right? Do something for me. Brian turned to Kevin. I had been silently listening to Brian's statements up until now, but I couldn't stay quiet any longer. Treating Daniel like a tool and saying Kevin would do if Daniel couldn't? Unforgivable. You really haven't changed at all, have you? You still can't see his talents. I snapped. Kevin's talents? He played basketball for so long but never made it to the pros, right? And in the end, he only got into this company because of you. I knew it. Kevin has no talent. Brian declared confidently. You're wrong. His talent lies in his exceptional character and his deep sense of empathy. Kevin never forgets a person he's met once, or the conversations he's had with them. That's why he always remembers the faces and names of our clients when he comes back, and he's adored by everyone for his thoughtfulness. This company's growth is thanks to his connections, I countered. What's that supposed to mean? So he just has a good personality, that's all. You can't call that a talent. It won't make money. Brian scoffed. Is money all you can ever think about? Then tell me, who do you think is earning more right now, you or Kevin? Kevin will undoubtedly become the CEO of this company about 10 years from now, when I retire. All the employees hope that Kevin will be the next CEO, and I believe that's how it should be. In such a short time, he has gained that level of trust. I asserted. Seeing the situation objectively, Brian must have realized that I was right. He started biting his lip. But what about you? You neglected Daniel, who supported you all this time, and lost his trust. You lost mine and Kevin's trust ages ago. And to top it all off, you quit your job and are working part-time in your 50s? What makes you think you have the right to complain about anyone? I questioned harshly. Brian couldn't say anything in return. Still sprawled on the floor where he had fallen from his chair, he couldn't even stand up from sheer despair. If you understand, then leave. I'm sorry. Please escort this man out. I instructed. At my words, other staff members from the hallway lifted Brian up and dragged him out of the company. As he was being carried away, Brian looked like a lifeless doll, his arms and legs dangling limply. The staff seemed to be struggling quite a bit to haul out a man so utterly drained of energy. I felt truly sorry for them. 10 years later. As for Brian, of course, he was rejected by my company after that incident. He continued his job search afterward, but couldn't find anything suitable. I heard he's now working at a gas station. Kevin took over as CEO, just as promised. I'm still supporting the company as the chairwoman. Daniel's genius had overshadowed Kevin's talents, but Kevin is also intelligent and hardworking. He works by leveraging his natural cheerfulness, quick wit, and deep sense of empathy. The company's growth shows no signs of slowing down. My sons and I are still giving our all, chasing our dreams. Seeing my granddaughter Mary not touching her hamburger, the server approached us with a stern tone. You need to eat what you've ordered, or it'll be a problem. Would you normally say that to a customer? Arguing seemed futile, so I responded humbly. I'm sorry. I think she's just waiting for mine to arrive. After my apologetic reply, the server walked away, looking dissatisfied. What a rude attitude. Trying to lighten the mood, I turned to Mary. Let's eat, shall we? But Mary remained downcast. What's wrong? Something seemed off. Then, the same server came back to our table, carrying something. Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal. She slammed the toy onto the table. Looking up at the server, I saw her smirking at Mary. It was a chilling sight. Mary must have felt something was wrong too. "I don't want this." She threw the toy on the table to the floor. She's never usually so rough. Now. We shouldn't throw things." As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly, "Grandma, let's get out of here!" Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted. Looking at the discarded toy, I noticed a piece of paper with something written on it. "Grandma! No!" Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and felt a chill. It was a Saturday. I was on my way to my son Jim's house. It was a warm day, hinting that spring was near. Then, "Mom, thanks for today as well." As soon as I arrived, Jim and his wife Kate left the house together for their once or twice a month Saturday work. "Grandma, what's for lunch today?" After seeing her parents off, Mary came to me with a lovely smile. "How about we go out to eat today?" Mary was delighted with my suggestion. "My name is Ellie. I am 63 years old this year. When my son and his wife are busy, I come to look after Mary like this. Having lost my husband early and spent a lot of time alone, the time spent with my granddaughter was nothing short of happiness for me. My son Jim has always tried hard not to be a burden on me. Even though there's no need for him to worry about me, he's been working ever since he graduated from high school. Thinking back, his first job was terrible. It was then I truly understood what a black company was, even as a parent. He would leave for work early in the morning and return home around the time the date changed. You could visibly see him getting thinner, even though he was quite well built, as he continued with that lifestyle. Seeing my son Jim become increasingly distressed, I somehow managed to convince him, and finally, he decided to quit that job. It had been 3 years since he started working there. Though there seemed to be some issues with the company upon leaving, I felt relieved once he was free from that place. "I'm going to be unemployed for a while." Jim said this with a look of regret, but seeing my child physically and mentally deteriorating was much harder for me. When I told him that, "I'll take my time to think and decide on the next place," he smiled, seemingly reassured. Being a hard worker, he continued his job search while studying for a qualification in a field he was interested in, and finally, he found a new job. I was worried because of the first experience, but the new workplace turned out to be surprisingly clean. He would come home on time, and there was no unpaid overtime. Jim seemed to have some peace of mind and was lively and enthusiastic about going to work every day. When he started to be recognized for his abilities and got on a career track, "There's something important I want to talk about," he said suddenly with a serious look. "I'm sensitive to these things." He must want to introduce a girlfriend. "Something important?" I feigned ignorance and asked. "There's someone I want you to meet, Mom." My intuition was right. Jim had dated a few women before. I wasn't explicitly told, but you can somehow tell. But this was the first time he wanted to introduce someone to me. "So, that means?" "I'm free whenever, so let me know when you've decided on a day to bring her over," I said casually, feeling a mix of happiness and sadness. Later, the woman Jim brought over was polite and greeted properly. I've always taught Jim to greet properly since he was young. So, the first impression was perfect. I didn't intend to judge, but I couldn't help noticing her appearance and behavior. "Nice to meet you, I'm Kate." She seemed nervous, her small frame tense. "Nice to meet you too, I'm Jim's mom." Wondering if I'd been staring too much, I greeted her brightly to ease the tension. "Jim, why don't you two sit in the living room and wait?" While they waited in the living room, I prepared some coffee. Before bringing it over, they were whispering to each other but quieted down when they saw me. As I served the coffee, I heard them say thank you. But then, there was silence for a while. How do mothers around the world liven up moments like these? It's my first time, and I'm just puzzled. Huh? But it's everyone's first time in these situations, isn't it? Realizing something so obvious made me laugh unexpectedly. Jim and Kate looked at me, puzzled. I'm sorry. It's just that it's the first time Jim's brought a girlfriend over, so I'm a bit nervous. I decided to just be myself from now on. After all, we're going to be a family for a long time. I'm nervous too. But today, we have something we want to tell you, Mom. Here it comes. This is the moment to listen seriously. Mom, we're thinking of getting married. I thought so. We've already got the okay from Kate's parents, but... Jim stops mid-sentence, looking surprised. Next to him, Kate also seems flustered. What are they both so flustered about? Mom. They peek at my face, worried. Wondering what was happening, I felt something cold spill onto my hand on my lap. It took me a moment to realize, but it seems tears were falling from my eyes. I'm so sorry. Did I do something wrong? It's the first meeting, and here the mother of the person they want to marry is suddenly crying. Kate's panicked reaction is now a funny story, but at that moment, she must have been really anxious. Oh, why is this happening? I'm not even sure myself. Saying that, I laughed through my tears. I had no intention of opposing Jim's marriage. In fact, I was happy that he had finally found someone to be happy with other than me. These tears must be of happiness. But I couldn't deny feeling like a part of my heart was being taken away. After excusing myself for a moment and coming back, they still looked worried. With a deliberately cheerful voice, I said, Kate, I trust Jim. If he chose you, I know everything will be okay no matter what. Kate seemed to be waiting for what I would say next. Promise me, both of you, to build a happy family together. I could see Kate's expression brighten. Thank you, Mom. All right, no more serious talk. With that, I started asking about how they got to know each other and their journey to deciding on marriage. While Jim was seeing Kate out, I muttered to my husband's portrait. Jim is getting married. Time flies, doesn't it? It felt as if the portrait of my husband smiled back. Kate works at the same place as Jim, and she plans to continue working even after getting married. Jim wanted to live together, but I declined. I didn't want to intrude on the young couple, and I was looking forward to having time to myself. Neither wanting to be a burden nor to burden them. They decided on a new home within cycling distance from our house, and Jim moved out. Time flew by, and soon my granddaughter Mary was born. I was amazed at how adorable a creature a grandchild could be. As Kate's maternity leave was coming to an end, I checked with Jim. Have you decided who will look after Mary? I was hoping for a chance to take care of Mary. Not out of kindness or obligation, but because I wanted to be with her. However, Jim thought I was worried and gave me a disappointing reply. Mom, don't worry. Our company has a daycare. Jim's new job really seemed to be a respectable white-collar company. I guess I won't be taking care of her. A few days later, Kate, who had been observing our conversation, brought me hope. Ellie, are you free this Saturday? She asked over the phone, and since I had no particular plans, I inquired about the matter. Actually, both Jim and I have sudden work on Saturday. And the daycare is closed on Saturdays. I immediately responded. Mary? You mean if I could take care of Mary? I was leaning forward even though I was on the phone. Could you? I almost answered too eagerly, but kept my composure. Yes, that's fine. My voice must have trembled with excitement. Kate sounded happy on the other end of the phone. Since then, I occasionally take care of Mary, which has continued to this day. As it approached noon, I took Mary out. As promised, we walked to the nearby family restaurant. I would prefer to eat at home, but after receiving suspicious calls and an unexpected pizza delivery while taking care of Mary at Jim's house, I felt uneasy. The family restaurant we were heading to was where I had worked part-time before, familiar and convenient for us. Upon arrival, the staff guided us to the usual spacious sofa seat. It was Saturday lunchtime, but it wasn't too crowded. "Mary, what would you like to eat today?" I handed her the menu while sitting next to her. "I want the kids' menu." Mary opened the menu to the kids' menu page. "I'll have this." She pointed to her usual choice, a hamburger. Mary really loves hamburgers, doesn't she? Seeing Mary's smiling face, I chose my own meal. Although spring was near, the days were still a bit chilly. I decided on the seasonal pot au feu. After placing our order via the touch panel, we went to the drink bar. Mary chose orange juice, and I filled a cup with coffee, then we returned to our seats. "Did Grandma know I like hamburgers?" "Of course." It was a casual conversation, but my face was smiling the whole time. "Right, Mary. Go to the bathroom before we eat." Mary often wants to go to the bathroom during meals, so I encouraged her to go ahead. "Okay." With a lively response, Mary headed to the bathroom. Her steps seemed lighter, perhaps excited for the hamburger. Her retreating figure was endearing to me. When Mary returned, the hamburger was served. But she didn't start eating. Maybe she was waiting for my meal to arrive. "Mary, you can start eating." I encouraged, but Mary looked at me puzzled. That's when the server brought my pot au feu. Noticing Mary hadn't touched her burger, the server spoke in a stern tone. "You need to eat what you've ordered." Would you normally say that to a customer? Surprised, I thought about the food waste issue and wondered if staff were instructed to say this. Arguing seemed pointless, so I responded humbly. "I'm sorry. She's just waiting for mine. We'll make sure it's eaten." The server left with a look of dissatisfaction. She was strikingly beautiful but had such a poor attitude. Shaking off my astonishment, I encouraged Mary. "Let's eat." However, Mary remained downcast and didn't touch her hamburger. "What's wrong, Mary?" Something seemed off. Then the same server approached with something in hand. "Here's the toy that comes with the kids' meal," she said bluntly, placing the toy on the table. Something was wrong. I boldly looked at the server, who was smirking at Mary. It wasn't a kind smile, but something creepy, as if plotting. Feeling a chill, Mary must have sensed something too. "I don't want this." She threw the toy on the floor. Something she'd never normally do. Under different circumstances, I would scold her, but this was different. Aware of other customers, I tried to calm her. Now. We shouldn't throw things." As I tried to calm Mary and pick up the toy she had thrown. Suddenly, "Grandma, let's get out of here!" Mary grabbed my arm as I was reaching for the toy and shouted. "What are you talking about?" I noticed something had come out of the discarded toy. Like a piece of paper. "Grandma, no!" Ignoring Mary's plea, I looked at the folded paper and was horrified. It was covered in what looked like a spell. "What is this?" I remembered the suspicious calls at Jim's house, with a voice chanting a spell as soon as I answered. Could there be a connection? Noticing something was wrong, the manager came out from the back. "Is there something wrong?" he asked, offering a hand as I crouched. He seemed to notice the paper in my hand. "What is this?" The manager looked disgusted. Standing up, I explained the situation. The unpleasant server just glared at Mary, silent. "I'm very sorry." The manager apologized, but the woman wouldn't take her eyes off Mary. I feared for Mary's safety and hugged her close, addressing the woman. "Even though the manager has apologized, don't you have anything to say?" I had tried not to upset her, but it seems I reached my limit too. My tone became a bit harsh. Perhaps triggered by my tone, the woman suddenly shouted, "If it weren't for this brat." She lunged at Mary. Instinctively, I shielded Mary, and the woman scratched me, yelling, "Move! Let go!" The manager tried to stop her, but he couldn't restrain her alone. Hearing the commotion, several male staff members subdued her, and someone had called the police. Mary started crying out of fear. "I'm sorry, Mary," I said, holding my scratched area and comforting her trembling body. Before the situation escalated further, Mary and I were taken to the restaurant's office. The woman was there too. "Emma, why did you do that?" The manager asked her, but she remained silent. "I'm really sorry." The store manager apologized to us again. As I was pondering over the situation, the police arrived. "Emma, 33 years old." I overheard her name during the separate questioning. I told the police about Emma's aggressive behavior towards Mary for not eating her hamburger and about the suspicious paper in the toy. Then, Mary, who had been listening, "Grandma, it's not that." She tugged at my sleeve. "What's wrong?" I asked, but she seemed hesitant. "Mary, can you tell me that story?" A young police officer gently encouraged her. "I saw it. When I was going to the bathroom, that woman put shrimp in the hamburger." Mary hesitantly testified. It was a fact I hadn't known. "So that's why you didn't eat it?" It sounded like Emma clicked her tongue. The young officer seemed to realize. This child has a shellfish allergy. He finally understood and asked the manager to check if the hamburger was still available. "Too bad, it must have been disposed of by now." Emma spoke up for the first time after the two had left the office, crossing her arms and legs with a disdainful look. "Could you answer our questions as well?" The officer sighed in disbelief at her questioning. "That's what I've been saying. I have nothing to tell. I'll keep silent." Emma fell silent again, idly playing with her loosely permed hair, looking bored. Her demeanor changed drastically when the manager and the young police officer returned to the office. In the officer's hand was a plate with a cold hamburger. Emma looked as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Under the police officer's supervision, the manager cut the hamburger open. Inside wasn't just shrimp, but also crab meat used in crab cream croquettes. "Does this restaurant's hamburgers normally contain shrimp and crab meat?" the officer asked. Probably for confirmation. "No, they do not." The manager seemed disappointed. Then, everyone in the room turned their gaze towards Emma. She kept her head down and didn't move, but then she started to shake her shoulders. "Emma." When the manager spoke to her, a small voice leaked out. I thought she might be crying. But it turned out she was trying to suppress laughter. Lifting her face, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out laughing loudly. "I got caught." Her voice was buoyant, like someone caught in a mischievous act, clearly enjoying herself. "I'll tell you everything. But I want that handsome guy over there, not you." She pointed at the young police officer after hearing our conversation. "Behave yourself." The officer who had been questioning Emma scolded her. "Oh, don't look so scary." Emma winked, but it seemed ineffective on the experienced officer. What a woman. I could only stare in disbelief at the scene. The details Emma bragged about were beyond normal comprehension for me. She claimed to be Jim's ex-girlfriend, a co-worker from his previous black company. Jim was treated as incompetent there, so Emma had broken up with him. However, upon hearing rumors of Jim's success at his new job, she attempted to reconnect. But Jim. Emma showed no remorse for her actions.
I even graciously offered to get back together, and he rejected me,
she complained. Understandably so. Jim was already married to Kate, and they had Mary. I thought if I could just deal with a child, he'd choose me over that plain woman. She spoke as if expecting understanding, but surely no one empathized. Emma had been monitoring Jim and Mary, engaging in harassment whenever she disapproved of something. The delivery orders I didn't recognize and the suspicious calls were her doing. When I started bringing Mary to this family restaurant, Emma also started working here, learning Mary's preferences and allergies. I was horrified. I even regretted inadvertently revealing Mary's allergy myself. I embraced Mary as she leaned against me. I thought I finally had my chance today. After confessing everything, Emma sighed with disappointment. When her story ended, the police officer took her away from the office. As she left, she glared at Mary and laughed creepily, which made me tighten my embrace. After apologizing to the restaurant staff for the inconvenience and thanking the person who saved the hamburger from being disposed of, Mary and I went back to Jim's house. We waited for Kate and Jim to come home and then told them about the day's events.
That woman, she did what?
Jim clenched his fist, trembling with anger, but Kate gently enveloped his hand.
I had heard about her, but what a terrible woman.
Kate knew of her from Jim's stories. If only I had rejected her more firmly. No, it's not your fault. I should have been more careful, too. Leaving everything to Ellie and even making her scared. Both Jim and Kate blamed themselves. I felt the same. Had I adequately protected Mary while she was in my care? In the heavy silence, Kate finally spoke. At least Mary is safe. That's all that matters. To ensure such an incident wouldn't repeat, we discussed and decided that Jim's family would move. Emma was sentenced to a severe prison term for attempting to harm a child. Unsatisfied with the verdict, she became frenzied and violent in court, looking possessed. Watching her from the gallery, Kate and I decided to remodel our home to protect Mary from that demon again. Emma continued to chant spells in prison, deemed insane, and was eventually transferred to a psychiatric ward. I was certain she wouldn't leave there. Watching her frenzied state confirmed my belief. But still, we needed reassurance. Jim's family moved into a home equipped with security cameras, alarms, and immediate security response. Kate switched to part-time work for more flexibility and spent more time with Mary. We were determined never to let Mary be scared again. We likely still share that sentiment. Grandma, why do you look scared? 5 years later, Mary, soon to be a 5th grader, peered into my face. Oh? Did I look scared? I diverted the topic.
Let's get ready. Aren't we going out to eat?
And also called out to Kate and Mary's sister, Lucy. It was Saturday. Basking in the warm spring sunshine, we started walking. Mary held Lucy's hand as they walked ahead, while Kate and I followed, watching their backs. Wait, are you trying to use the bathroom? Dirty old people are banned from using it. We use that toilet too, you know. If you guys use it, our brand new toilet will get dirty immediately, won't it?
Sorry, but you'll have to make do with peeing in the bushes outside. Oh, and don't do it in the garden, okay? If you dirty our precious home even a little, I'll never forgive you.
Both we were taken aback by Emily and Wilson's words. A bathroom ban? That's just unthinkable. No matter how much they dislike us, such behavior is inexcusable. We have endured harsh words from our son and his wife before. As we're the kind of people who dislike fights, we've always quietly accepted their treatment. But now, we've reached our limit. We need to make it clear what happens when they make enemies of us. I started plotting a scenario for revenge. I'm sure this plan will work. My name is Sarah, a 62-year-old homemaker. I live with my husband. I met Johnson, my husband, at the company where we used to work. After Johnson's persistent pursuit, we started dating and smoothly transitioned into marriage. I was blessed with a son with Johnson. A lively boy. We named him Wilson and raised him with care. Wilson grew up healthily and eventually found a job. He married a woman named Emily and built a family. I remember the feeling genuinely happy when he first introduced Emily to us. But that happiness didn't last long. Everything went awry when I realized why she had married him. After marriage, they lived with us. One day, Wilson and Johnson were out, and only Emily and I were at home. At first, we were chatting amicably in the living room, but then Emily's mobile phone rang. It seemed she received a call. "Sorry, Sarah, it looks like it's from a friend." With that, she excused herself and went back to her room. Left alone in the living room, I decided to clean the house to pass the time. As I was passing Emily's room, I inadvertently overheard her conversation. Her voice was so loud that I couldn't help but hear. "Seriously, those old folks are living too long. If they suddenly died, we could get the inheritance. I'm married into the family for the president's fortune, but this is just hell." Her words felt like a cold shower to me. Actually, Johnson's father was the president of well-known top-tier company. However, the company was set to be inherited by his brother. Still, being part of the president's family, Johnson had some share of the wealth. It turned out Emily had married Wilson with that very intention in mind. They probably believed that once we passed away, the inheritance would become theirs. In fact, we had always treated Wilson and his wife with this in mind. Such behavior couldn't be tolerated. I shared this with Johnson that night. Initially, he was shocked, saying, "Really?" but he trusted my words. After discussing, we decided not to act immediately but to observe if Emily would reveal her true intentions. Maybe, in the meantime, she might change her attitude and start treating us like a real family. It was a decision made with the faint hope. But things didn't go as expected. To test Wilson and his wife, we observed their behavior. We invited them out, asked for help with chores, and so on. Gradually, they seemed to find us a nuisance, and their attitude changed. "Wilson, you're free now, right? I'm sorry to ask you, but can you give me a hand to do the laundry? My back hurts." One day, seeing Wilson relaxing in the living room, I asked him. Although Emily had been the one to speak harshly that day, Johnson suspected they might be in this together. We suspect that maybe Wilson feels in the same way. So, I started to approach Wilson to understand his feelings. At my request, Wilson looked up from his mobile phone, sighed with annoyance, and said, "Can't you do that yourself, Mom? You're a mother, after all. Shouldn't you be able to handle the household chores by yourself?" He then returned his gaze to his mobile phone. It became clear that he had no intention of helping. His attitude seemed to say, "I have no intention of being a family with you." This thought sent a chill down my spine. Don't say that. Family should help each other when in trouble. You have your own family now, Wilson. You need to act responsibly. My voice trembled, reflecting my fear. If my suspicions were true, it meant that even Wilson, whom we had lovingly raised, was betraying us. That was something I couldn't bear. Desperately, I pleaded, "Please help me." But Wilson didn't even look up from his phone or show any sign of getting up from the sofa. His unwillingness to help was evident. Persisting in my request, he let out a heavy sigh and continued. "Look," he continued. "Enough is enough. Yes, you're my mother, but that doesn't give you the right to be selfish. I have a wife, Emily, and I need to work for her.
I'm already exhausted every day, and now you're asking me to do chores too? That's cruel. Don't ask us to do such things anymore. We are essentially strangers.
Essentially strangers. Those words pierced deeply into my heart. It confirmed my fears. Both Wilson and Emily seem to be after Johnson's inheritance. They seem indifferent to us, thinking as long as they receive the inheritance, that's all that matters. This betrayal from family deeply wounded me. Yet, we couldn't foresee something even worse. I immediately told Johnson about Wilson's possible intent for the inheritance. Johnson, seemingly already convinced.
I thought as much.
He nodded. And so, our family dynamics became distorted. Amidst all this, Wilson and his wife decided to move out. When they brought it up, we couldn't help but feel relieved. By then, living with them had become unbearable. Even sharing the same house with them was distressing. They wanted to live in a new single-family home, which would require a significant amount of money. To hasten their move, we decided to provide financial assistance.
Dad, Mom, thanks. Family is indeed valuable.
Knowing the underlying meaning of Wilson's words, we couldn't genuinely rejoice. The construction of their new house was completed, and it was the day of their move. They packed up some of their belongings and left the house. A week later, we visited their new home with a housewarming gift. Though I didn't want to go, I remembered my father-in-law teaching about maintaining certain courtesies, so I decided to endure it a bit. Nice house, isn't it? Smells like new construction. Their home was more beautiful than expected, probably due to the money spent on it. After being shown around various rooms, when we gave the celebration gift in the living room.
Thank you so much,
she said. She seemed pleased as she put away the gift. While chatting in the living room, I felt the need to use the restroom. Where's the bathroom? May I use it? I said. To my request, Wilson and his wife responded unbelievably. Wait, are you trying to use the bathroom? Dirty old people are banned from using it. We use that toilet too, you know. If you use it, our brand new toilet will get dirty immediately, won't it? Followed by his words.
Sorry, but you'll have to make do with peeing in the bushes outside. Oh, and don't do it in the garden, okay? If you dirty our precious home even a little, I'll never forgive you.
Their words made me feel dizzy. It was too cruel, regardless of how much they disliked us. At that moment, they were like strangers to me. There was no familial affection left. That's why I decided to start my revenge. I planned to ruin them thoroughly. I secretly devised a scenario for it. Exchanging glances with Johnson, who was just as stunned. It seemed Johnson was thinking the same as me. We don't want to be a nuisance, and since we've given the housewarming gift, maybe we should leave if we're not wanted. There was no reason to stay in their house any longer. We had fulfilled our duty by giving a housewarming gift. If they were going to be that terrible to us, we didn't need to stay. Right. Our presence here only seems to bother them. It's better to leave now. I had anticipated being unwelcome, but to be told things like being banned from using the toilet or to go in the bushes was too much.
Yeah, leave right now. Don't want this house getting old and musty because of some old people. Don't stay any longer than necessary.
Old people making the house musty? That's just absurd. Realizing how much my own son despised us was a bit of a shock. But I couldn't see Wilson as my son anymore. I'd deal with these conflicting feelings later. For now, the priority was to leave. And don't come over unless absolutely necessary. We've got your gift, so you're of no use to us now. Maybe see you at the baby shower, but that's it. Even though she demanded us to leave right away, she still wants a gift, what greedy people. Though giving them gifts was burdensome, we were fortunately not short on money. So, to keep the peace and calm myself, I accepted it.
Then let's sever ties. If you despise us so much, it must be hard to continue as a family, right? Anything is fine with me as long as we don't have to deal with you and your family, who are troublesome.
Are they high on their own anger? Emily quickly agreed to my suggestion. likely not understanding the consequences of her decision. We gathered our things and left Wilson's house. They hardly even saw us out. But this was just the beginning of our revenge. I couldn't wait to see them fall into the hell we were about to create. I can't help but look forward to that moment. Back home, I shared the revenge plan with Johnson. He said, "This is going to be interesting." He laughed and was in agreement with my plan. They say spouses become like mirrors of each other, and I really felt that was true. Since then, we had been very busy. To complete our revenge, various preparations were necessary. Before we knew it, about a week had passed. Despite being busy, we were leading a calm life without any major incidents with Wilson and his wife. But it seemed about time for a disruption. As I was expecting this, the phone rang. Johnson and I exchanged glances. Sure enough, it was Wilson on the line. I put the call on speaker so Johnson could hear and spoke to Wilson.
"Hello, Wilson? What's up? Did something happen?"
It was surprising he called so nonchalantly after what had happened. Normally, after such an incident, I'd think it would be awkward to make a phone call. But Wilson, sounding cornered and desperate, blurted out.
"What's happened, you ask? What have you two done? Thanks to you, I'm in a terrible situation. Do something about it now."
Wilson's statement was disjointed, and I couldn't understand what he was talking about. Of course, I had orchestrated this revenge, so I could guess what might be happening to him.
"What exactly do you mean? Tell me everything from the start, I don't understand."
Since I had no idea what he was accusing us of, I couldn't respond. Urging Wilson to explain, he started his story in an angry tone. It seemed the trouble started when he went to work after the incident. While working, Wilson noticed something unusual. The looks directed at him by his colleagues were unusually cold. Wilson, who tends to be overly concerned with others' perceptions, found it unbearable to stay at work and left early that day. Hoping it was just his imagination, he went to work again the next day, but the cold stares remained unchanged. He confronted a colleague about it, but all he got in response was, "Ask yourself." Just that, and they wouldn't tell me anything more. Furthermore, it wasn't just his department colleagues who were giving him cold stares. It seemed as if everyone in the company, from high-ranking superiors to colleagues in other departments, were looking at him with disdain. He felt as if every employee he encountered was regarding him with contempt. Despite racking his brain, Wilson couldn't think of a reason for the cold treatment at work. He hadn't made any mistakes on the job. Eventually, he surmised that my husband, Johnson, a member of the company's founding family, and I must have been involved.
"What have you two done? Because of you, I can't work anymore. You need to take responsibility."
Wilson lashed out at us one-sidedly. Indeed, the frigid reception he faced wasn't a figment of his imagination, it was a part of our scheme. We had promptly informed my brother-in-law about the ordeal with Wilson and his wife. He values us greatly and was furious upon hearing it. Unfortunately, my brother-in-law isn't one to keep secrets. He inadvertently leaked our story to his secretary and other managerial staff. Soon enough, the entire company knew about their misdeeds, and everyone began to scorn Wilson.
"This is too much. Fix it now. I can't work in that kind of environment."
Indeed, someone like him, who is easily swayed by others' opinions, couldn't possibly continue working in such a hostile environment. However, his employment was actually a result of nepotism. He had been lazy during his student days, lacking notable educational achievements or qualifications. Since he couldn't find a satisfactory job, his sympathetic uncle hired him at his company. Could someone like Wilson really manage a proper job search? From my perspective, it seemed unlikely. That company was his only option. Yet, working there under current circumstances was impossible for him.
"Please, you have to do something. I can't work under those stairs. You caused this, right? Then fix it,"
he yelled over the phone. But I had no intention of forgiving him.
"We've disowned you, remember? Why are you asking for help now?" "That was all Emily's doing. I always considered you and Dad as my family. Families are supposed to help each other, right? So, help me.
Indeed, families should help each other. But he had misunderstood the meaning of family. You help because they are your family, not treat them as family only when help is needed. Feeling the conversation was pointless, I ended the call with him. Afterward, my phone kept ringing incessantly, so I blocked his number. That was how we completely severed ties with our own son. Our revenge was far from over. The day after our conversation with Wilson, my phone rang again. This time, it was Emily.
Sarah, please open the entrance. I have something to discuss, including about Wilson. Let me in quickly.
As soon as I answered the phone, she blurted out such things. It seemed that she, thinking it best to resolve matters directly, was waiting at the entrance of our house, eager to talk. Well, it was our former house, after all.
Emily, we're not at that house anymore.
Indeed, it was our former home. Since then, we had sold the house where we lived with them and moved to a new home. A brand new, sparkling single-family home. Our new home, chosen with a slightly competitive spirit, was more spacious and grander than Wilson and Emily's.
What? Then where are you? Things are terrible here. If we don't know where you are, how can we receive the inheritance? Tell me your current address.
She seemingly failed to comprehend the meaning of disownment. To disown means no longer being family, and inheritance is not passed to non-family members. We had even updated our will to ensure that, come what may, Wilson and his wife would not receive any inheritance. However, she appeared to misunderstand, thinking that if some family connection remained, they could still inherit.
Emily, you can no longer receive any inheritance. We've disowned you, remember? We're no longer family. Why would we give an inheritance to someone who's not family?
I was astonished at her lack of understanding. Her ignorance was so profound that it was almost laughable. Surprised by my response, she exclaimed.
What?
She exclaimed in a loud voice.
What? I didn't know that. That's a real problem if we can't get the inheritance. Let's forget about the disownment, okay? We're still family, right?
Her self-centeredness was astounding. It was baffling how someone could be so obsessed with money. Her illogical and selfish statements left me speechless. Misinterpreting my silence as agreement, she continued.
How about we live together? You've moved out of this house, right? I just realized how lonely it is without you, Sarah. Our house is big, so you can live here too. Let's live together as a family.
And yet, this was the same person who had once called us dirty old people and drove us out. Now she was even suggesting living together, clearly all for the sake of inheritance. It was obvious that restarting life with them was out of the question. I wondered if she even understood that. Could she really not understand even that?
Sorry, but we'll have to decline. And from now on, please don't contact us. We've disowned you, so we're no longer family. And non-family members won't inherit anything. Please understand and give up. No! That's unacceptable! Please, Sarah, forgive us!
When I firmly declared our disownment, Emily seemed to finally grasp its meaning and desperately clung to any hope. But my decision was final. And likely Johnson's as well. Therefore, I ended the call with her and immediately blocked her number. This way, she couldn't contact us again. They wouldn't know our current whereabouts. Essentially, we've completed our disownment. We felt a sense of relief, having cleanly severed this unpleasant connection. Later, I heard from acquaintances and brother-in-law that Wilson and Emily began fighting incessantly over the inheritance and their jobs, leading to a divorce. They argued bitterly over alimony and property division, even hiring lawyers and taking their disputes to court. After the divorce was finalized, Emily returned to her parents' home. She seemed certain that her biological parents would accept her, but when they actually saw her and learned of the situation, they were furious. Apparently, she was promptly kicked out of the house. Wilson, having quit his job, struggled to find new employment and is now working tirelessly in part-time roles to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Johnson and I are enjoying a peaceful and happy life. The weight of the Wilson affair lifted, we've found newfound freedom. We're planning to go on a trip soon, taking brother-in-law and his wife along. Johnson and I have been making plans for this trip together. It's our way of thanking him for his help in our revenge. We are carefully planning this vacation. Family is about supporting each other and helping in times of need. But that doesn't always mean being related by blood. Some, like Wilson and Emily, disregard even their own family. This incident has deeply ingrained that lesson in us. Factory worker father? Breaking off the engagement. As soon as she said that, Edith, my mother-in-law, threw her coffee at my dad. Beside her, laughing, my father-in-law, John, made no move to stop Edith. Coffee stains quickly spread across the suit Dad had specially cleaned for this day. Fortunately, the coffee was lukewarm and there was no risk of a burn. I offered Dad a handkerchief in surprise, while Timothy frantically tried to clean his suit. While worrying about any injuries, Timothy scolded his parents, who just kept laughing. During this, Dad said nothing, simply stood up, pointed at them, and declared, "Then I'll just have to ruin your company." He said this in a voice I had never heard before, took my hand, and we left the house. Behind us, Timothy's shouts at his parents echoed, and soon he followed us. "I'm terribly sorry. I'll make sure my parents apologize later." "No need. It's over. We're cutting ties," he said somberly, patting Timothy on the shoulder. "My name is Penelope, a 26-year-old office worker. My family has a bit of a unique situation. I grew up without a mom. She passed away when I was young, and Dad raised me single-handedly. Despite being busy as a factory manager, he never missed a school event. He'd often rush back to work after these events, but I've always respected him deeply for it. During college, I dated Timothy, who was 2 years my senior. He was gentle, sincere, and popular at university. Despite knowing it was a long shot, I confessed to him, and he accepted. However, Timothy had his worries, mainly about his parents. He spoke of them only in vague terms, never delving into details. It seemed there was some conflict with them, but I didn't press, though it troubled me. Still, Timothy himself was flawless, so our relationship continued. He lived alone since starting university, but occasionally visited his parents. He'd return exhausted, clearly stressed about them. He always put me first, making him my pride and joy. I had always wanted to introduce him to Dad, the man I respected and my beloved boyfriend. I wondered how they would react to each other. One day, while on a date, we unexpectedly bumped into Dad. "Oh, Dad. Aren't you supposed to be at work? What are you doing here?" "Ah, Penelope. Just returning from a client." "And who's this?" "Oh, this is Timothy. We're dating." Dad, not usually stern but with a somewhat fierce look, can be misunderstood. Timothy was very nervous meeting Dad for the first time. "Nice to meet you, I'm Timothy. I am fortunate to be dating Penelope." Timothy greeted Dad quickly in a tense manner. Dad warmly accepted him, chatting and laughing with him. "So, you're Penelope's boyfriend. Don't be so nervous. Take good care of her." "Yes, I will. Thank you." As they continued talking, Timothy's nervousness faded, and they got along well. I was relieved to see the two most important men in my life getting along. I had worried about Dad's reaction, but he had to return to work. So we parted ways. After Dad left, I turned to Timothy, who seemed to be in a daze. When I asked what was wrong, he suddenly became excited. "That was really your dad, right?" I was puzzled by his unexpected words, but since it was the truth, I answered without hesitation. "Yes, that was my dad." "Is there something wrong with that?" "Right, that makes sense, that was him, huh?" He crossed his arms and seemed lost in thought for a while. Curious, I decided to ask him what was on his mind. "What are you thinking about so hard? Did you not like him?" "No way, that's not it. I do like him, but, well." His hesitant reply was all I got, and any further questions were evaded. I became anxious as he wouldn't tell me the reason. I wondered if, despite his words, he actually found it hard to get along with my dad. And so, I began to worry unnecessarily. A few days later, Timothy called me out, saying he had something important to talk about. Maybe because of the recent meeting with my dad, I felt unusually nervous as I went to our meeting spot. When I arrived at the cafe, he was already there. Through the glass, I could see him looking downcast. This deepened my anxiety, but I decided to act cheerfully anyway. As I entered the cafe and approached him slowly, I said, "Timothy, sorry, did you wait long?" I crept up behind him and spoke, tapping his shoulder, which startled him.
"Penelope, you scared me."
Startled, he caught his breath as he saw me. And I was surprised to see how much I had startled him. He had been that deep in thought. Sitting opposite the still gloomy him, I placed our order. His continued gloom only increased my anxiety. Desperate to hear what was on his mind, I spoke to him. "Hey, Timothy. What's bothering you so much? Didn't you like my dad?" When I asked, Timothy looked up and immediately denied it. "No, not at all. I actually respect your dad. That's why my. He stopped mid-sentence and looked down again, causing me to sigh. Realizing I had no choice but to press for an answer, I asked directly. "If you have a problem, I want to know. What's troubling you?" He took a deep breath as if making up his mind, then began to share. "I have something to tell you about my parents. It's a long story, but I need you to hear it all." The story he shared was shocking. According to him, his parents lacked grace and only judged people by their education and jobs. He had suffered a lot because of them, as they habitually interfered with his life. Whenever he introduced a girlfriend, they would criticize her and drive her away. The women would leave, often in tears, breaking up with him. That's why he wanted to marry me, but was troubled about bringing up his parents. But that's not a problem. We just don't have to involve them after getting married, and endure only during the marriage proposal. Dad seemed to like Timothy, so what was the issue? "I don't mind about that, it's okay. Dad liked you too, so don't worry." "Really? That makes me happy. When I first met your dad, I was shocked to see how different he was from my own parents. I thought, if I marry Penelope, I'll become the son of such a great dad, even if it's just by marriage. But getting married means your parents become mine too, and I couldn't make up my mind." He brightened up when I mentioned Dad liked him, but then he sighed deeply again. However, an idea seemed to strike him, and he looked up, apologizing. "When we go to my parents to announce our marriage, can your dad come with us? I want them to know such an admirable person exists. It might not change them immediately, but I hope it will make them rethink." "Okay. I'll talk to Dad. But I wish you had told me this more straightforwardly."
"Oh, sorry. I'll properly do it now."
Realizing his oversight, he hastily made a proper marriage proposal. Having accepted his proposal, I decided to discuss it with Dad. Initially reluctant, Dad agreed to join us for the marriage proposal visit after Timothy asked. We then coordinated with Timothy to schedule a visit to his parents. On the day of the visit, we stood in front of Timothy's parents' house, all of us neatly dressed. It was my first time meeting Timothy's parents, and knowing their reputation made me nervous. Seeing us tense, Dad chuckled and reassured us. "Don't be so stiff. Timothy's parents are just overly concerned. Be confident." Feeling reassured by Dad's pat on our shoulders, my tension eased slightly. As the appointed time arrived, Timothy rang the doorbell. But there was no sound inside, making us wonder if they were not home. In a bit of a panic, Timothy rang the bell again, but still no response. Feeling awkward in front of Dad, Timothy excused himself and went inside first. Dad and I exchanged glances, waiting silently for Timothy to return. After a short while, Timothy reappeared at the entrance, looking flustered. Before I could ask what happened, he started making excuses with a forced smile. Sorry, I was just delayed. Please wait a bit longer, I'll be ready soon. He quickly went back inside. Dad sighed in disbelief at this behavior, and I felt increasingly anxious. I feared this incident might derail the marriage talks. Though Dad is not quick-tempered, he dislikes dishonesty. So, I couldn't help but consider the worst-case scenario. As these thoughts crossed my mind, Timothy finally came back to the entrance. Apologizing, he invited us inside. Inside, Timothy's parents were already sitting on the sofa, but their demeanor was strange. Editham, his mother, greeted us with a sarcastic smile and arrogant attitude, while John, his father, seemed disinterested and looked away. Though we were led to the sitting room, the coffee served was lukewarm. Silent since our arrival, Timothy's behavior, and the tense atmosphere made me uneasy. However, knowing we needed to greet them, I tried to compose myself. As Timothy introduced his parents and us, I felt warmth in my heart from his considerate introduction of Dad and me. But his parents scoffed at our introduction, and the next moment, Edith's hand reached for her cup, shocking me. Factory worker father? Breaking off the engagement. As soon as she said that, Edith threw her coffee at Dad. Beside her, laughing, John made no move to stop Edith. Coffee stains quickly spread across the suit he had specially cleaned for this day. Fortunately, the coffee was lukewarm, and there was no risk of a burn. I offered Dad a handkerchief in surprise, while Timothy frantically tried to clean Dad's suit. While worrying about injuries, Timothy scolded his parents, who just kept laughing. During this, Dad said nothing, simply stood up, pointed at them, and declared, "Then I'll just have to ruin your company." He said this in a voice I had never heard before, took my hand, and we left the house. Behind us, Timothy's shouts at his parents echoed, and soon he followed us.
I'm terribly sorry. I'll make sure my parents apologize later.
No need. It's over. We're cutting ties. Dad said somberly, patting Timothy on the shoulder. Then we went back to our house with Timothy, and Dad immediately changed his clothes. Meanwhile, Timothy earnestly apologized outside Dad's room, with Dad's troubled voice occasionally heard. But I was too shocked by Edith's actions to pay much attention to anything else. From the moment I saw their faces, I knew getting along would be difficult due to their arrogant attitude. But I never expected them to do something like that, and I was furious that they belittled Dad. Sitting on the living room sofa and clenching my fists, I kept replaying the earlier events. I knew getting worked up wouldn't help, but I couldn't help myself. Eventually, Dad came into the living room after changing, followed by Timothy, who immediately apologized to me. "Penelope, I'm truly sorry. I had no idea they would do something like that, let alone belittle someone. I'm really sorry, I did a terrible thing." Timothy probably knew it wasn't something easily forgiven. The fact he didn't ask for forgiveness showed his sincerity. This made me feel like I should apologize to him. I took Timothy's hand, who was on his knees, and apologized. "I'm sorry too for saying something so thoughtless without knowing anything. I never expected it to turn out like this." Then I turned to Dad to offer my deepest apology. "Dad, I'm sorry too. My careless suggestion led to this mess." Dad just looked down and shrugged his shoulders in response to my apology. It's no wonder he didn't say anything. This situation was unexpected for everyone here. But this meant his earlier words might actually come true. I decided to ask him directly about his intentions. "Dad, what you said to them earlier, was that true? Are you really planning to ruin their company?" In response to my question, Dad looked at Timothy and then nodded firmly. "Yes, it's true. I do intend to do it. His company's performance has been poor, and I've been thinking about what to do with it. It's a good opportunity to cut it off." Dad's eyes were serious and unwavering. He is the owner of a factory, a well-known leading local company where he started as a worker. He first worked as a worker at this factory. He gave up his dream of becoming a painter after Mom passed away to raise me alone. Working tirelessly in the factory, his hard work was recognized, and he climbed the ranks. Eventually, he was favored by the previous president and promoted repeatedly. When the previous president, or rather, the former factory manager, wanted to retire, Dad was chosen to take over. The factory owns several subsidiaries, and one of them is managed by John, Timothy's father. This was revealed during the earlier greeting. John should have recognized this, but he failed to, as Edith acted first, before Timothy introduced him in detail. Timothy just wanted to say that Dad worked in the factory, which is the parent company of John's. But Edith and John's prejudice led to this unfortunate situation. If they had listened properly, this might not have happened. Dad said John's company seemed to be mismanaged. This could potentially affect Dad's factory, so he had been considering what action to take.
I was thinking of layoffs to improve management, but I'd rather avoid that if possible. It seemed like the right time to make a cut.
He smiled troubledly, probably not wanting to lay off employees. Regret tinged his words. After saying this, he turned to Timothy and said in a low voice,
"I've decided to do it, but it means your parents will be in trouble. It's harsh, but are you sure you're okay with this?"
Faced with this question, Timothy hesitated for a moment but then looked Dad in the eye and replied, "I've already cut ties with them. They did unforgivable things. They need to atone for it, and I want them to reflect on this incident and everything else. More than that, I have a request. It's inappropriate at this time, but I must ask, please let me get engaged to Penelope. I'm aware of the trouble my parents caused. More than anything, I want to be with Penelope. Please allow it." Dad crossed his arms, deep in thought. It may seem inconsiderate right after such an incident. However, moved by Timothy's fervor, I also pleaded with Dad. "I also ask you, Dad. Despite everything, I want to be with Timothy." After hearing our pleas, Dad hummed for a bit before shaking his head as if resigned.
"If both of you feel the same, then it's fine. But there's a condition. Your parents are business owners, after all. I want to know what will happen to their employees. If you can't answer that, your marriage is off."
Dad said this and sent Timothy out, not even glancing at me before returning to his room. A few days later, Timothy came with a plan regarding John's company's employees. He had promised Dad beforehand and was discussing it when I returned from work. Apparently, Timothy had listed potential new jobs for all the employees and was showing it to Dad.
"So, I would like to ask, albeit presumptuously, for these employees to transfer to your company. I hope to support their employment there, contributing to the business's growth."
Timothy was earnestly requesting Dad to hire them.
"And I know it's selfish, but I would like to join the company too. I'll work without salary until their work stabilizes and shows results. I want to compensate for the shortcomings with my work and salary. Once that's done, I'd like to marry Penelope."
Timothy seemed to blame himself for the company's downfall. He wanted to work hard as a lubricant in the situation. I was just learning now that our marriage would be delayed, but it seemed unavoidable.
"Welcome back, Penelope. You heard, right? I'm sorry for deciding something so important on my own. But I couldn't be happy just myself." "That's too much, Timothy. Dad, let me join the company too. I'll work alongside Timothy, so please accept his proposal."
As I said this, Timothy tried to stop me. But I refused to back down and desperately begged Dad. While we were doing this, Dad remained silent. But after our repeated pleas, he finally unfolded his arms and quietly nodded. Meanwhile, Timothy's parents hadn't apologized yet. Dad had been waiting these past days, but that was coming to an end.
"Time's up,"
he muttered, beginning preparations to take over John's company. Time passed, and John's company finally collapsed. Then, Timothy received a furious call from his parents, and the three of us were summoned to their house. When we arrived at their home, it was crowded with people. They were all protesting the company's collapse, shouting angrily. John probably hadn't explained anything to the employees. By calling us there, it seemed they intended to shift their own blunders onto us. As soon as they spotted us, they began pointing and accusing.
Look there! They're the cause of everything, not me. They destroyed the company, not me. It's true. Especially that woman, she seduced our son and ingratiated herself with his father. We're the victims here. So stop making such a fuss.
As Timothy's parents ranted, trying to deflect from themselves. Although he got angry with his parents saying whatever they want, he was trying to soothe the protesting crowd.
Please wait, everyone. Yes, my father's company collapsed, but it's because of those two. And I've arranged job placements for all of you. Please hear me out.
The crowd gradually quieted down, and they began listening to us. Timothy read out each person's name, informing them of their next job. The former employees, who realized that they won't get laid off, seemed relieved. After announcing everyone's new positions, Timothy's parents started causing a scene.
Hey, Timothy. What about us? Why ignore us? Tell us our job placements. If you do, we'll forgive that man and even approve your marriage to that woman.
Ignoring their wailing, Timothy began explaining the circumstances of the company's downfall. The former employees, who realized that they won't be laid off, seemed relieved.
Which is why I'm truly sorry for the trouble. Thanks to our generous president, your jobs are saved. Please, let's start anew without anger.
Turning to Dad, Timothy gave an expression of gratitude.
We've caused so much trouble. Thank you for indulging our selfishness. I promise to work diligently.
The former employees, moved by Timothy's actions, also appreciate to Dad. Amidst this, his parents were the only ones dissenting.
Don't be fooled. That man destroyed the company, and she instigated it. Face reality. You've lost your jobs because of them, right? Just because they've helped you now doesn't mean you should lose sight of the truth.
Despite their desperate appeals, no one paid any attention to Timothy's parents. Especially after hearing the whole story from Timothy earlier. Even Dad ignored their words. As the former employees looked on, hoping for reassurance, Dad told them that he would inform them of the details later, which brought voices of relief. The employees left the house. Once everyone was gone and it became quiet, Timothy's parents started complaining about how they couldn't live anymore.
The company's collapse means we'll lose this house, which was the collateral. Yes, exactly. Where are we supposed to live now?
Timothy sighed in exasperation at his parents, who were determined to blame us.
It's obviously your own fault. Maybe it's time you learned a bit of self-reflection.
He rebuked them, but it seemed they had no intention of listening. Unable to bear it anymore, I finally burst out in anger.
After all the trouble you've caused Timothy, getting carried away because you were business owners. Isn't this all because you only cared about titles?
My words prompted them to retort. But Dad intervened, not letting them speak.
A business owner is responsible. Taking responsibility is part of the job. Do your last duty properly.
Receiving a stern scolding from each of us, they were left speechless. Leaving the two of them behind, we departed from there. Eventually, they lost everything: the company, the house, and the land. They didn't offer any compensation to the former employees and seemed to have dodged the issue. However, having lost everything, they ended up arrested for Dash. They contacted Timothy for help, but he coldly refused, having cut ties with them. They're probably in jail now. Since then, we've received no contact from them. Even if they got out, they still had to atone for their actions towards the former employees. Timothy and I quit our jobs and joined Dad's company. For the first few months, we lived off our savings and worked without a salary, as promised. One day, we met some of the employees from Timothy's parents' company. Recognizing us, they rushed over, eagerly shaking our hands, expressing gratitude for the new job, and thanking Dad for taking them in. They thanked Timothy for arranging it and thanked me for my help. I didn't remember, but I had helped them with some documents when they first joined. Grateful for everything, they left, saying they'd continue to work hard. Hearing this, we felt relieved and hurried to Dad's office. He warmly welcomed us in his office and handed us thick envelopes.
What is this?
It's your unpaid salaries. It didn't all fit in one envelope, so there are several. Dad chuckled, leaving us astonished. We hadn't been here long enough to compensate for employing many new workers. Yet, we were being given our salaries. Bewildered, we just stood there. But Dad continued, thanking us. Thanks to you, they work with enthusiasm. They always express their gratitude and worry about you. I couldn't shame myself by not paying such excellent employees. And our performance has definitely improved. Thank you. Hearing this, we embraced and cried together. We had been so focused on ourselves that we're unable to see anything else around us. But more than that, we were moved by their concern for us. Then Dad said something even more heartwarming. Timothy, I'm impressed with your leadership. If my daughter agrees, will you marry her?
Yes. Yes, of course. I promise I'll make her happy.
With a tear-streaked face, Timothy promised me and Dad. I hugged him and cried together. So, we got married. We continue to work together at Dad's company, living happily. Gradually, work has become more efficient, allowing us to have a broader view of the company, even discussing productivity with Dad. Timothy visits the factory and subsidiaries, asking about inconveniences and proposing solutions, staying very busy. We both work with more passion than at our previous jobs. Finding fulfillment really does change one's work ethic. But soon, that will have to be put on hold. I'm taking maternity leave from Dad's company. Dad, Timothy, everyone at the company, and I are all looking forward to the arrival of our grandchild.